Okay. Thank you all for joining us on the line today. Before we begin, Minister Baines and I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are joining
This conference is being recorded.
Before we start, Minister Baines and I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are joining you from the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Our hearts go out to the Lebanese community in Beirut and here at home. Depuis le début de la pandémie, notre gouvernement fait tout ce qu'il faut pour assurer la sécurité de la population, protéger les emplois, soutenir les propriétaires d'entreprises et donner à tous l'aide dont ils ont besoin. Canadians have stepped up and have done a tremendous job in flattening the curve, and we are especially proud of the doctors, nurses, and healthcare providers on the front lines, as well as those providing essential services. My department, Public Services and Procurement Canada, has been working diligently to secure the necessary personal protective equipment and supplies necessary to keep Canadians safe during the COVID-19 pandemic. With our Essential Services Contingency Reserve announced just a couple of weeks ago, we continue to procure PPE and provide broad support as some restrictions are lifted, making sure that Canadians have access to PPE as our economy restarts and reopens. At the same time, we are increasingly focused on the next stage of our recovery, especially preparing Canada for mass vaccinations. Canada is pursuing agreements with a number of international and domestic companies to guarantee a supply base of potential vaccines. In particular, we are engaged with both domestic and international suppliers while pursuing the same approach that we have employed throughout our response to COVID-19. We are working on all possible fronts and diversifying our vaccine supply chains. In other words, we are working with a number of suppliers in order to deliver safe and effective vaccines to Canadians as quickly as possible. Today, we are taking an important step forward. I am pleased to announce that the Government of Canada has entered into agreements with Pfizer and Moderna to secure millions of doses of their vaccine candidates. We are extremely pleased to be among the first countries to establish these agreements. Pfizer is evaluating at least 4 experimental vaccine candidates and is currently undergoing clinical trials. These trials are occurring in various countries, including Germany and the United States, and are already exhibiting promising results. The New England Journal of Medicine also recently published encouraging data from Moderna's trials relating to its vaccine candidate. The findings support further development of the Moderna vaccine. These studies continue in the United States. These agreements with Moderna and Pfizer are indicative of our aggressive approach to secure access to vaccine candidates now, so that Canadians are at the front of the line when a vaccine becomes available. These vaccine candidates are very promising, and we all look forward to the day when restrictions can be lifted entirely. However, there is more work to do. Any potential vaccine candidate will take time to develop, properly test, mass manufacture, and distribute. And all potential vaccines will require Health Canada regulatory approval prior to being used to safely vaccinate Canadians. Nous avons encore un long chemin devant nous, mais grâce aux ententes annoncées aujourd'hui, nous nous assurons que le Canada sera prêt à franchir la prochaine et dernière étape pour protéger ses citoyens. Today's announcement is a further step in terms of Canada's response to the pandemic. We are ensuring that Canada will be ready to protect our citizens when a vaccine is developed. That is why we are also procuring supplies, syringes, needles, and alcohol swabs that will be needed to perform the final manufacturing and packaging stages of vaccine production, as well as to support safe and efficient immunization. In closing, the agreements relating to vaccine procurement with Moderna and Pfizer that I've announced today are another positive measure towards our government's response to the pandemic. Canadians can rest assured that we will leave no stone unturned to keep them healthy and safe. Les Canadiens peuvent être assurés que nous continuerons de faire tout notre possible pour les garder en santé et en sécurité. I will continue to share updates with you on our progress regarding vaccines as they become available. We owe it to Canadians to explore every option for vaccines, and that is exactly what we will continue to do. I will now turn to my colleague, Minister Bains, to tell you more about his department's imperative work in supporting these agreements. Merci beaucoup. Megwetch. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Anita, and good morning, everyone. Since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've been doing everything we can to protect the health and safety of all Canadians. And I'm here today to talk about the life-saving work of Canada's scientific community. You've spent sleepless nights in your labs or at your desks helping us fight this pandemic. And I want to acknowledge that our efforts wouldn't be possible without yours. So thank you very much for stepping up in a big way. While we have many tools at our disposal to fight COVID-19, we understand that the one that will get us back to our day-to-day lives in a safe and effective manner is important to have a vaccine that we can deliver for all Canadians. That's why today I'm excited to highlight the tremendous work being undertaken by both Canada's COVID-19 vaccine and therapeutic task forces. Since June, these scientific experts and industry leaders have been providing advice to the government on how to target our investments in projects with the greatest chance of success. They've been working tirelessly around the clock to deliver for Canadians. And our government firmly believes in the role of science in good decision-making. Now, arguably more than ever, it's incredibly important that we make evidence-based decisions and recommendations that support the work of our world-class scientists. So let me begin with our vaccine task force. Leading this task force are co-chairs Dr. Joanne Langley and Mark Levonen. Dr. Langley is the division head of the infectious disease at the IWK Healthcare Centre in Halifax and a professor of pediatrics and community health and epidemiology within Dalhousie University's Faculty of Medicine. And Mr. Levonen is the former president of Sanofi Pasteur Limited, the Canadian vaccine division of Sanofi. Au nom de la ministre de la Santé, je peux dire que nous sommes ravis que ces deux experts exceptionnels dirigent ce groupe de travail. Et l'approche du Canada en matière de vaccins est entre de bonnes mains. Today, I'm also pleased to announce that we have made our first investment following their expert advice. We're investing nearly $56 million to support clinical trials with Variation Biotechnologies Incorporated, VBI. The company is developing a COVID-19 vaccine at its Ottawa research facility. And through the Strategic Innovation Fund, the government will support VBI's work on preclinical studies and clinical trials. More investments will follow based on the continued work of the task forces, and I look forward to announcing additional Strategic Innovation Fund projects in the near future. As we continue our work to develop a made-in-Canada solution, the task force is also helping to identify and connect international vaccine candidates of interest to Canada. And Minister Anand just gave us some great news on that front, so we're very, very happy about that. And we're also making sure that we will be able to produce a vaccine at the scale necessary to protect all Canadians. And at the end of the day, our government's goal and objective is very simple. We want to deliver a safe, effective vaccine to all Canadians as soon as possible. En fin de compte, l'objectif de notre gouvernement est de fournir un vaccin sûr et efficace à tous les Canadiens le plus rapidement possible. With this in mind, we made several early investments targeting vaccine development. On April the 23rd, we announced $1.1 billion package with new funding for vaccine development, treatment research and production, and new and improved measures to track the spread of the virus. We also dedicated nearly $115 million for Canadian Institutes of Health Research to fund vaccine-related research and $175 million investment in promising antibody therapy and treatment through technology developed by Vancouver's Abcelera, which is now entering phase 3 of clinical trials. So today, I'm announcing additional federal funding for vaccine research here at home. Another great Canadian vaccine candidate, IMV, is receiving more than $3 million through the IRAP program and our NGen supercluster to establish a complete Canadian supply chain for its DPX COVID-19 vaccine. As the company works on clinical trials and manufacturing scale-up, this project will help to boost our domestic vaccine capacity. Let me congratulate the teams at both VBI and IMV on your exceptional work to keep Canadians safe. We'll be watching your progress very closely. As we all know, both fundamental and applied research stemming from Canada's world-class post-secondary institutions continues to be critical to our COVID-19 response. So I'm happy to share that NSERC, in collaboration with SSHRC and CIHR, so for Canadians that are listening, these are Canada's 3 main research councils, have committed $19 million to support the 369 COVID-related research projects, including work on vaccines. So that's a lot of progress on vaccines, but we know that vaccines are not developed overnight. Until we can immunize all Canadians, we must also focus on producing treatments for those who contract the virus. Therapeutic technologies and drugs will save lives and limit the impacts of this pandemic. And so I'm pleased to announce today that we have also established the COVID-19 Therapeutics Task Force, co-chaired by Nancy Harrison, a director and past chair of Life Sciences BC, and Cedric Bison, partner at Terralis Capital. The task force, these 2 individuals, will make sure and assess that the task force prioritize COVID-19 therapeutic projects seeking government support. So on behalf of the Minister of Health, I'd like to thank these scientific and industry leaders for stepping up. To sum up, I want to express my gratitude to the many Canadians who have stepped up to help in the fight against COVID-19. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of highlighting the life-saving work of our world-class scientists in Canada who are helping us make the best possible decisions to keep Canadians safe and healthy. Our work continues as we make further investments in support of the research for safe and effective treatments and vaccines. We know that we need to continue to invest and support our scientists, and that's exactly what we'll do. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Merci. We will now take questions from the telephone lines. Nous allons maintenant passer à la période de questions. If you have a question and you're using a speakerphone, please lift your handset before making your selection. Si vous utilisez un téléphone main libre, levez le combiné avant d'effectuer votre sélection. If you have a question, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad. Si vous désirez poser une question, veuillez s'il vous plaît appuyer sur les touches étoile 1 de votre téléphone à clavier. At any time you wish to cancel your question, please press the pound sign. Vous pouvez à tout moment lever votre question en appuyant sur le dièse. So please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. There will be a brief pause while the participants register. Il y aura un court délai vous permettant de vous enregistrer dans la file d'attente pour la période de questions. We thank you for your patience. Merci de votre patience. The first question is from Mia Rabson, the Canadian Press. You are allowed one question and one follow-up. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Good morning. I'm wondering, Minister Anand, if you might be able to walk us through a little bit more about what these deals with Pfizer and Moderna look like, how much money we're talking about, and if we will have that vaccine in hand before they're approved, if we're waiting, just sort of those kinds of details.
Thanks so much, Mia, for the question. And I'll begin by saying that we are engaged with multiple partners, potential suppliers of vaccines, both domestically and internationally. And so the information that we can reveal at the current time regarding doses in particular is being kept confidential because we are taking a prudent approach to the negotiations while we are engaged with other suppliers. Having said that, I will definitely indicate that in our contracting, we are taking the approach of establishing and negotiating firm orders with multiple suppliers, as well as options to purchase more orders should the need arise. And so the approach is one of flexibility to ensure that as the situation evolves and as the number of suppliers becomes more firm for Canada, we can isolate precisely how many doses we would need.
Thanks for that. I'm wondering, though, if this means we will be getting the vaccines in hand as they're being developed, so they're ready to go if they do get approval, or if we are waiting for that approval to come before we actually get the vaccine in hand.
All of the vaccines are going to require approval. Obviously, Health Canada regulatory approval is central here, and so the contracts reflect the requirement for Health Canada approval. And in particular, once that has occurred, we are expecting deliveries, if all goes well, in 2021.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question de Philippe Vincent Foisy, Radio-Canada. Une question et une question de développement. À vous la parole.
Bonjour, je vais avoir une question de suivi après. Juste un petit rappel que le français et les francophones sont plus intéressés à savoir ce qui se passe avec le vaccin. Donc, s'il peut y avoir plus de français dans les conférences de presse, ce serait grandement apprécié. J'aimerais savoir, vous avez des ententes pour acheter des vaccins comme ça avec combien de compagnies au Canada, combien de compagnies à travers le monde, et on s'attend à recevoir combien de doses là, d'ici 1 an ou 2?
Merci beaucoup pour la question. Je vais commencer et peut-être le ministre Bains peut ajouter quelque chose aussi. Notre approche agressive continue avec un éventail diversifié de développeurs, de fournisseurs de premier plan pour obtenir des vaccins pour les Canadiens et Canadiennes plus rapidement que possible et avec les résultats. Sujet de combien de fournisseurs nous avons fait des négociations avec beaucoup de fournisseurs, plus de 5 par exemple, mais je voudrais dire que c'est très sensitif maintenant et je vais ajouter des autres détails dans les semaines et mois prochains.
Et je voudrais souligner l'objectif de notre gouvernement est de fournir un vaccin sûr et efficace à tous les Canadiens le plus rapidement possible. C'est pourquoi nous avons investi dans le VBI et j'espère à bientôt nous allons annoncer quelque chose pour Medicago aussi. 2 exemples ici au Canada. Et en même temps, nous allons continuer à poursuivre les opportunités internationales aussi.
Donc, Je voulais juste peut-être confirmer, on a combien d'ententes officielles avec les compagnies? Ça, c'est peut-être juste d'avoir le chiffre exact sur combien on a d'ententes officielles avec les compagnies. Là, je ne l'ai pas eu encore. Puis, je me demandais hier, la docteure Teresa Tam disait, c'est pas une solution magique, le vaccin. There's no silver bullet. On ne sait même pas s'ils vont être efficaces à 100%, à quel point ils vont être efficaces. Donc, est-ce qu'il y a d'autres solutions? Est-ce que vous êtes en train de développer d'autres choses? Ou est-ce que vous êtes un peu en train de dire aux Canadiens, c'est la solution miracle, comme vous le disiez au début, alors que cela ne l'est pas?
Je vais commencer encore une fois. Maintenant et aujourd'hui, nous annonçons 2 ententes officielles. Et ça se firme aussi aujourd'hui. Et aussi, nous avons des négociations avec des autres fournisseurs, comme j'ai dit. Au sujet de la Silver Bullet, c'est une question très importante et Dr. Tam a dit ça hier, je sais. Elle a raison. C'est vrai. Il n'y a pas une silver bullet et c'est très, très important de suivre le conseil de Dr. Tam et les experts. Nous devons porter des masques, par exemple. Et ça, c'est l'approche de le gouvernement du Canada. Nous avons beaucoup de choses pour les Canadiens de suivre, pour protéger tout le monde contre la pandémie. Et les vaccins, ça c'est une chose, mais pas le silver bullet, comme Dr. Tam a dit hier.
Oui, et c'est pourquoi nous avons investi à Absalera. Absalera représente beaucoup de possibilités pour tous les Canadiens, particulièrement parce que ce n'est pas un vaccin, mais un thérapeutique. Par exemple, l'autre option, nous allons continuer à poursuivre.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Ryan Timilty, The National Post. Your line is open.
Yeah, Ministers, I'm wondering, in this context, when you're trying to ensure some trust in Canadians, trying to garner their trust and their faith that the government's working for them, I'm wondering why not release the number of doses that you've secured here. I understand not wanting to release what you've paid for them because of the ongoing negotiations, but wouldn't releasing the number of doses that you've secured offer some sense of security to Canadians?
Well, listen, I understand the question and the reason for the question. We are very, very intensely negotiating multiple agreements with multiple suppliers. The information relating to doses will come. But we have to remember that these suppliers are at various stages of vaccine development. It is important for Canadians to know that we are taking an approach to contractual negotiations that builds in flexibility for us to be able to increase orders in the case of, for example, successful clinical trials, successful vaccination production. And as a result, we are going to be able to have the ability to purchase more vaccines if that would be prudent for Canada. In the weeks to come, I will hope to be disclosing further information regarding dosages, as these are the first 2 contracts that we have entered into. I'm going to prefer to wait until we have more to say on multiple contracts.
And I'm wondering, you talked a little bit about this, but one of the other leading candidates internationally is the Oxford vaccine from AstraZeneca. Can you say if that's another one of the companies that you're in discussions with?
Obviously, there are leading candidates for the vaccine, and I'm going to ask Minister Baines to add something here in a moment. But we are taking our contractual negotiation orders, as it were, from the Vaccine Task Force. We are acting according to their advice and the Minister of Health, obviously, and we are really making sure that we follow the science, as Nav mentioned. And so that is part and parcel of our negotiation strategy. We're not out there on a frolic of our own by any stretch of the imagination. We need to make sure that we are engaged with suppliers that have promising vaccine candidates in clinical trials and the like, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Nav?
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Anita. There's really three components to our strategy. First is to make sure we continue to invest in the best possible science here in Canada and support Canadian initiatives. That's why earlier on we invested in Vito Intervac in Saskatoon. We've also invested in the National Research Council for their production facility. And today I announced investments in VBI, for example, and IMV. And so domestic investments in Canadian initiatives is very important. We're also focusing on leading and promising international vaccine initiatives, and that's what Minister Anand highlighted as well in her announcement today. And what we're trying to do is also leverage some domestic production opportunities as well to make sure that we can follow up with those international initiatives as well as support Canadian clinical trials. So our strategy is focused on domestic production, supporting Canadian scientists, and pursuing promising international vaccine initiatives. All of this is informed by the vaccine and therapeutic task forces. So this is based on good science, it's based on expert advice, and that's what's enabling us to make decisions and being able to prioritize which initiatives to pursue. And as we're able to negotiate these terms, we will unveil those specific details in a timely manner.